Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jess with So Many Creations, and in this fundamentals skill builder video, we are going to talk about one of my favorite things to make, handles. If you are making a bag of any kind, whether it's a big bag, a tote bag, a medium bag, a shoulder bag, or even a little tiny boxy pouch, it's probably going to need a handle of some kind. That might be a long handle, it might be short handles, it might even be both. This little boxy pouch has just a grab handle. And for me, I love making handles. I think it is the most simple and satisfying part of making a bag. It's really hard to go wrong when you make a handle. You really just have to make it look the way that you want it to. You can be creative with your stitching, your colors, your textures, all different things with handles. And it's a fun and mindless kind of part of the bag making process. So for me, I love to do handles, and I always include them in the beginning of my patterns. I feel like once you get them done and you get to look, you say to yourself, wow, I actually just made something and it looks like something. It looks like it's actually a part of a bag. Sometimes during bag making, when we're putting in pockets or zippers or different parts of the bag, it just doesn't look like anything yet. You know what I mean? So I know that this is not universal. I understand that there's a lot of you out there, maybe some of you watching this video right now, who don't love making handles. And honestly, I don't understand why. So I'm hoping that I will be able to convince you to love handles even more after this video. So what we're going to talk about in this part of the fundamental series is just the basics of making handles. I'm going to show you some cork options. I'm also going to show you some fabric options. We're going to talk about the real basics of it, how to fold them, how to top stitch them, my favorite feet for sewing handles, and just all of that kind of stuff. We're not going to get into hardware. So anything that you see here that has a slide, swivel hooks, rivets, that's going to be in another part of this series. Let's keep it simple for today. Let's just talk about basically the calculation on how to make a handle and how to make them look amazing. All right, so before we get into it, if you like videos like this, don't forget to hit subscribe, click the notification bell, and give it a thumbs up. Let's go make some handles. So when it comes to making handles, I don't make a whole lot of cotton handles anymore, just because I have been working so much with cork lately. Probably over the last 2 or so years, I haven't done a whole lot with cotton. But it doesn't mean that I don't still enjoy making a cotton handle, and I wanted to share with you in the beginning part of this video my formula for making a cotton handle. They're actually very easy, so if you are brand new to bag making, or if you are just struggling because maybe some of the patterns you purchased have you making your handles in a different way and you're not enjoying it, hopefully this is going to give you some clarification and make it even easier for you. So this right here is my Taurus tote bag pattern. And you can see that this one is all cotton. I did this in the video while I was working on some additions to this pattern. So in this very, very basic pattern, this is an awesome beginner friendly bag. I did the entire thing inside and out in cotton. So for my handles right here, I used a lightweight denim. It's a little bit heavier than a quilter's cotton, but it worked really nicely for this project. And this is interfaced, and we'll talk about that in just a minute as well. And so for this bag, it just made the most sense, since I had cotton on the top and on the bottom, that I had cotton handles. One thing that I learned very early on in bag making is that I don't care for handles where you have to make very long tubes and turn them right side out. And I'm sure if you've ever tried that method, you probably don't enjoy it either. The reason is, first, it's hard to turn. These handles right here are the full length that you get on a piece of fabric. So because these were from a denim, they're actually, I think, about 60 inches instead of 44. That's a lot of handle. That's a lot of a tube to sew. And when you're trying to turn that right side out, it's really awkward and hard to turn. Plus, they never want to lay flat. They always look kind of bumpy and lumpy. And that's not what I'm going for. I want my bags to look like I could have purchased them, not like I made them. I want to trick anybody that looks into thinking, there's no way she could have made that. It looks so professional. So I learned this technique many years ago, very early on in bag making, and this is the only way that I will make cotton handles. So this one right here, these are 1-inch finished handles. So we're going to talk about finish size versus the cut size. And I've got some demos here for you. Again, we're not going to be doing any hardware today, but I will just touch base a slight bit on this one right here when it comes to interfacing. So let's go ahead and look at the pieces that I have, and we'll talk about the formula to get this size handle. So when it comes to making a cotton handle, we need to make sure that we are hiding our raw edges. We cannot leave them raw because cotton frays. So anytime that we have to make a handle like this, we want to make sure that those are completely hidden. Now, what you'll see here are a 4, a 5, and a 6-inch wide strip of fabric. Obviously, these are not the correct length for handles. They're not long enough. This is just for a demo. But let's just talk about the sizes I have here and what size they're going to be when they're finished. So when it comes to making cotton handles, you want your finish size, which on this one is 1 inch. This is finished. So this is how it would look in the bag, like on the tote bag I just showed you. If I want my handle to finish at 1 inch, I need to start at 4 inches. So I'm always multiplying by 4. So if I want my handle to be like this one, which is 1.5 inches, 1.5 inches times 4 is 6. So I have here a 4-inch strip that would finish at 1. I have a 5-inch strip, which finishes at 1 1/4. I really love this size, especially on tote bags. It's kind of that in between, and I think it looks really nice. And this one right here is 6 inches, and that's going to finish at 1.5. And it's all based on how we fold it. Now, when it comes to the fabric itself, each of these does have interfacing on the back. I do not think that you should put a handle into your bag that is made from a cotton or woven fabric of any kind without some sort of interfacing. You need something that's going to give it some structure and also prevent some stretch. Now, these were interfaced with Pellon 809, which is Decor Bond. And I understand if you've worked with it, some people love it, some people hate it. And unfortunately for Decor Bond, it's more hated than it is loved. I've always had great luck with it, so I use it a lot. If you don't want to use that, you could also use Decoville Light, which is 525. That is a little bit heavier. Still a nice medium weight fusible, but a little on the heavier side. So it's going to make your handle a little stiffer and a little thicker. And what you have to ask yourself is, can my machine handle that? Can my machine sew through 4 layers of my fabric and my interfacing, and also add that in whatever way I'm adding it to the bag? Am I sewing it to the front, like I have here on the tourist tote bag, and I'm adding another layer of interface fabric? Am I just making this as a separate handle and adding hardware like I have here? So those are things that you'll have to ask yourself about your particular machine. Now, I sew on a heavy duty machine. She's sitting right here. And this machine can go through many, many layers. So I'm okay if I go a little heavier. Also, what you want to keep in mind, I'm using quilter's cotton, and on the tourist tote bag, I used a lightweight denim. If I'm using a canvas or something heavier, I may want to adjust my interfacing to kind of meet the needs that I have. So if my canvas is heavier, I personally would still use this or Decoville Light, but you might want to go a little bit lighter, again, depending on your machine and depending on the finished product. So for me, putting in a cotton handle without interfacing is a huge no-no. That is just something that I really don't prefer. And bag making is personal. So don't let my opinion be the only opinion. If you like something different, if you like a different interfacing, or if you like no interfacing, that is totally fine. So when it comes to making our handles, what we're going to do is a 4-fold technique. It's going to turn this into this. And I'm going to show you how to do that. I didn't bring the iron over, but I have some demo pieces, so I'll show you how these are going to look. Let me grab those. All right, so when it comes to the finish size, what I have right here, I've got my 6-inch strip. That became 1.5. So this is going to be folded to become that. My 5-inch strip becomes 1 1/4. I love that size. It's a really nice one. And then my 4-inch strip becomes 1. Can we go smaller? Yes. Can you go wider? Sure. This is your bag, and you can do it however you would like. Now, in cotton, I think the skinniest, thinnest strap that I've ever done is a 1/2 inch, which is a little challenging. And when we get to the pressing part, you'll understand it's a little challenging to fold, but it is doable. But for cotton, for the most part, I'm between 1 inch to 1.5 inches. So those are our finish sizes and our cut sizes. So how do we get here? So what we're going to do is once we have our piece cut out, And I'm gonna start with this one because that's what I decided to do. So I've got my 4-inch wide by whatever my length is. That's gonna depend on the pattern. It could be 24 inches or it could be 44 inches, depending on how I'm sewing it in and what I'm using it for. But for demo purposes, I just have a little chunk here. So my piece is 4 inches wide. So what I'm gonna do at my iron is I'm going to turn this over with my interfacing side up, and I'm going to fold it in half, interfacing side together, and I'm going to press all the way down the center, just like this one. So there's my piece. I folded it and I've made a nice crease. One other thing I want to mention is if you have a pressing clapper, this makes a huge difference for handles, because a lot of times what happens after we press this, it wants to open back up. The interfacing doesn't want to lay flat while it's still warm. So if you have a pressing clapper, you can put that on there, and as you're ironing, just keep moving it along, and that's going to get a nice crisp edge, just like I have here. If you don't have a pressing clapper, you can also use a heavy book, and if you don't tell anyone, I'll tell you this little secret. I used to use my ruler. It does warp the ruler, but if you flip it back over, it's fine afterwards. So don't share that with anyone, because somebody will tell you that you shouldn't do that. Not me. So, all right, step 1, I folded it in half, interfacing sides together. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold each of my edges in towards that center crease. And I would highly recommend that you don't try to cheat this. I know that sometimes you're looking at this long piece of fabric and you're going to try to do all these folds at once. Press down the middle, press into one edge, press into the other edge. Don't try to do it all at once, especially on a long handle. It will get messy and wonky, and that's not what you want. So I pressed in half. I pressed each of these halves in towards the middle just like that, and that's how it looks. And now when I fold it one more time and give it a final press, I have this beautiful handle that only has raw edges down here. Those are the parts that are going to get either added to hardware or sewn into my bag. And now it's ready for top stitching. So before we talk about top stitching, here's another little thing that I wanted to mention, and I will go over this more in depth in the next video where we discuss hardware. On this handle right here, which this is a full length of fabric that I was prepping for something else, it is an inch finish. So I've got my 4-inch strip that I folded my edges in towards the middle, just like this, ready to top stitch. You may notice that down here it's floppy. Do you see how there's no interfacing for a couple inches? It's the same on the other end. If you're going to be adding hardware like I did here, something like a swivel hook or anything down here that where you're going to need to fold your edges a few times, I would suggest not doing interfacing to the end. When it's all top stitched and ready to add hardware, we can hide the raw edges and pull it down like that and have a nice clean edge. Then you don't have to worry about having too much interfacing, because if we fold this once and then twice, we have 12 layers of fabric and 12 layers of interfacing. That is a lot for any domestic machine to handle. That's even a lot for this girl to handle. So for me, I just like to leave a little bit at the end, and then I can address that later and it's ready for hardware. On a handle like this one that I was folding, if I was just going to be attaching it to the bag or doing something different with it, maybe attaching it to a piece of hardware like this, I probably would not need to leave so much, or I wouldn't need to leave any at all. If you want to leave just a little bit, if it goes into a seam like we have right here, you could easily leave like maybe a 1/2 inch or 1/4 of an inch. That way it goes into your seam and it doesn't cause any lumps. All right, so now we've talked about folding and we've talked a little bit about interfacing. How do we top stitch these? Well, top stitching is super personal. It is something that you're going to decide on your own how you like to do it. For me, I like to do a double top stitch. That is something that I enjoy doing. So I have my feet here. I have my domestic feet and I also have my heavy duty feet. When I am doing my top stitching, I love to do an 1/8 inch and a 1/4 of an inch. And I'll tell you why. When you look at this handle right here, this is an 1.5 inch finished. I've got an 1/8 inch and I've got a 1/4 of an inch on either side. What I like about the 1/8 inch is that it holds my edges together. So this is not going to separate and pull apart. If I stitch too far in, it can do that. Also, do I need to top stitch over here on this folded edge? Technically, no. But why not? Because I think it looks more professional and finished. Plus, it's going to keep that nice and flat. So if we took this handle to the machine and only stitched right here, this side doesn't look very finished, at least not to me. So I find that whatever I do on the right, I do on the left. And I love to do the 1/8 and 1/4 on anything that is an inch and above. On something small like a 1/2 inch, I definitely would just stick with the 1/8. It's a little overkill to try to get too much stitching. But we're going to get into some different types of stitching and some different ways to kind of elevate your handle in the next part when we talk about cork. But for now, I wanted to show you some feet that I really like. If I'm using my domestic machine, these are going to be the 2 feet that I use for my handle. So I sew on Genomes. So this is a G foot and this is an O. Your machines will probably have something different with different letters or numbers. But the G foot right here, what you're looking for is either a stitch in the ditch foot or something like this, which is a blind hem foot. And the reason for this, or an edge joining foot, I should say, this kind of little piece of metal that's in the middle, if I put this on my machine and I move my needle to the left, all the way to the left, when I run this along the edge of my handle, you see how that little opening right there is just on the edge of my handle? That gives me beautiful 1/8 inch top stitching. That's how I did this right here. And then when it comes time for 1/4 inch, I just use whatever my 1/4 inch setting is on my machine. I use my 1/4 inch foot. I love a foot that has a guide. It really helps me. Not everyone likes the foot with the guide. I do. But this for 1/4 inch is perfect because again, it gives it kind of a bumper for my handle. It means it's not going anywhere. It stays nice and straight and I do my 1/4 inch. Now here is a question I get asked all the time and I'm going to tell you my answer, but also please note that it technically doesn't matter. I get asked a lot, which one do I do first? Do I do 1/8 or 1/4? Technically, it doesn't matter. If you close this open side, however you close it is totally fine. If I did a 1/4, I'll just do the 1/4 over here, switch out my foot and do the 1/8. But I always do the 1/8 first. I don't know why. I don't know how that started, but it's just the way that I do it. So when I don't, it feels really weird. It feels super strange to do a 1/4 inch and then go back and do the 1/8. So for me, I always sew the open side first. I always do an 1/8. And that first line of stitching, I am very slow. I take my time. I'm checking my edges. I'm getting everything sewn. Once that's done, I can go into full speed and do all the rest of my stitching. So if I'm sewing on this machine right here, which is my heavy duty machine, it's a Janome HD9. These are my favorite feet. I talk about these feet all the time. They have been a major game changer for me. And these are called compensating feet. This is an 1/8 and this is a 1/4. And what is a compensating foot? Well, right here, I'm not sure if you can see that, but right there, there's a spring. And this part of the foot moves up and down. It compensates for heavier materials. So when I'm sewing and I'm doing my 1/8 inch, because this is a straight stitch machine, the needle doesn't move left to right. So it's only under the control of the foot and wherever I line up my fabric. When I put this on, this edge right here acts kind of like that blind hem foot does. It keeps my handle from moving, and it can also accommodate if I have to go over some things because it has the spring in it. But this gives me gorgeous 1/8 inch sewing. This one right here is also my 1/4 inch. These are Teflon. I have them in metal as well. They both work just as great. I do find that I use the Teflon feet more than the metal ones. And again, I do sew in a lot of cork. You're going to ask, I already know, where did these come from? I will put the websites down here. There are 2 of them that you can check out. So you can head over to either of these websites. That is where I purchase these, and they go in and out of stock from time to time. But these right here, these are not made for domestics. They are only made for a heavy duty high shank machine, something that does not have a needle that moves left and right. And they may look like they would fit on your regular machine. Trust me, they don't. I've done the legwork. It's all in how the machine is manufactured. So if you have a Janome, a Juki, a Brother, Baby Lock, I think almost every manufacturer has a simple mechanical straight stitch heavy duty machine. These should work for you. So go check those out. All right, so I think we've done everything we can do here on our cotton handles. Aside from talking about hardware, which we will talk about in a future video, let's go ahead, get all this out of the way, and let me grab some cork, and we'll talk about cork because that is really my favorite thing to sew with. It's what I've been doing forever, for a very long time now, and it's where I have the most fun with handles. So I'm going to clean this up. I'll come back and we'll talk about cork. So we went over how to make cotton handles. And when it comes to cotton handles, we have to take into consideration interfacing. We also have to do quite a bit of pressing. And for the most part, I use a lot of clips. I didn't mention that in the beginning of the video, but I use a lot of clips. You could even use pins when you're holding anything together and you need to take it to the sewing machine. So when it comes to cork, we get to look at things a little bit differently. Cork handles, they're my favorite to sew. First, they're a lot sturdier and stronger in your bag, so they're gonna last a lot longer. When you look at a bag that you've made that is all cotton, the first place that it's going to wear is going to be on the handles because we grab it there all the time. We're putting it on our shoulder, we're picking it up. So the handles are always going to be something that wears out first. That is also true for cork, but cork has such a longer lifetime than cotton. Now, any of the things that I do in this section as far as cork can be duplicated in vinyl. I'm just going to say cork because it's what I tend to use. I use some vinyl, but not a lot. So when I say cork, what I mean is something that doesn't fray. Just as a little side note. So not only are cork handles sturdier, but what I love about them is that I can make them with raw edges. When it comes to cotton, we have to hide those raw edges. Otherwise, we're going to have fraying. It's not going to look so nice on our bag, and it's also going to take away from the lifetime of the bag. Once it starts to fray, we don't want that. We don't want all of those little threads. It's going to look messy. It's not going to look professional, and our handle is going to start to slowly fall apart. So what we want to do is hide them. But when it comes to cork, we don't have to. And this might be a little controversial depending on what your point of view is as far as the aesthetics of the bag. So I'm going to show you a couple ways that you can fold your cork handles. We're going to talk about what I call a double fold and a triple fold, which you might have different names for it. I might be wrong in how I call it, but it's okay. And we're going to talk about also how you can do some top stitching. I'm going to get into a little bit more detail on some ways that you can really change up the top stitching to give your handle a different look. So some of the samples that I have right here, these little pieces, what you'll notice is I did my standard 1/8 and 1/4, and I have it on both of these. On this one, I did a very matchy-matchy kind of a purple, and on this one, I have a variegated thread. Either of those is going to make a difference to the finished look of your bag. And it's not that these could not be applied to cotton, but these just happen to be the ones I had samples on. So take all of this and kind of apply it to your handles in general, but mostly in this section, we're going to talk about cork. So right here, I did my basic 1/8 inch, 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch. On this one right here, I did a little decorative stitch. Now, right now, my domestic machine is not cooperating. It needs to go and have a good cleaning, so it's not being my best friend. But on this one, I did do my 1/8 and 1/4, and then I went ahead and added this really fun stitch in the middle. That is also a great way to add a little extra dimension and uniqueness to your project. I have certain friends and customers that have one stitch that they just love on their domestic machine, and they add it to all their handles, and I can look at a bag and I instantly know who it belongs to. So it kind of becomes their signature. This was just one that I was playing around with, and I love the contrast of the orange thread on the brown. I could have definitely matched my thread and given it more of like a quilted look, but I thought that looked really neat. Now this one right here, you'll see in comparison, this one, my stitching is different. I've got my 1/8 inch, but why are these stitches so close together in the center? And it's all about the folding. So let's talk about the calculations and the math that we need for cork handles versus cotton. Cotton, we know we needed 4 times the finished size. Cork is a little bit different. And then let's also talk about a few different ways that we can fold them. So I have a few finished handles here. Let's take a look at these, and then we'll talk about the folding techniques. I'm going to start with a simple, what I call a double fold. And I guess in reality, it's a single fold because we're only folding it once, but I call it a double fold because it's 2 layers. Does that make sense? It makes sense in my head. I hope it makes sense to you. So this one right here is what I call a double fold. This is just 2 layers of cork. So right here I have a folded edge, And right here I have a raw edge because I can leave it that way. And if that bugs you, I will show you an alternative way that you can fold your handle. But when I say double fold, this is what I mean. And a lot of times I will do the 2-layer fold, depending on if I'm adding hardware, depending how I'm putting it into the bag, and also what the requirements are for that bag. A lot of times when I'm writing a pattern, I try to stretch the piece of cork as far as I can. Sometimes that means we can only do double fold handles. We can't do a triple fold, which is technically my favorite. So when we look at a bag like this is Violet, one of my newer patterns. My handles right here and my handle right here, these are all double folds. I would need extra cork to do the triple fold, which is why I did it the way that I did it. Now, if this bugs you, you see these little pieces right here. It's not the cork that's fraying. It's actually the backing fabric. You can take your lighter and you can trim and then burn those little edges, and it just kind of gets rid of those. If you don't like that, I will show you another way that you can fold it. So let's talk first about the double fold, the 2-fold. Right here, I have a mess. I have a piece of cork right here. This piece of cork measures 3 inches. So if I'm folding it in half, my finished handle would be 1.5 inches. So I have 2 options. I can just simply fold it in half like this, and I'll just add a clip if I want. Sometimes when I'm at the machine, I just kind of fold it as I'm sewing. I think it's a little bit easier sometimes. I'll also talk to you a little bit about tape. So if I wanted to, I could take this to my machine and I would do my 1/8 1/4 and my 1/8 1/4. But if I'm not loving that and I don't like that look, here's another way that I can do it. Same measurement, so it's 3 inches. It'll be 1.5 inches finished. I can turn this over, and down the center, I can just measure over 1.5 inches and draw a line down the middle. And I can use tape. This is double-sided tape. I always say double stick tape. I don't know. I think they're both right. But you can take this. This is 1/4 inch. I use a lot of 1/8 inch. And you can add your tape right down your edge like this. You could also do this with clips, but I just think it's so much easier with tape. And you just add that on there. And now we're got the same finished size, but we'll have our raw edges together in the back, so it's a little neater. And we'll just do this. And then we'll fold this edge in as well. Once that is all taped and ready to go, here's our finished handle, and we can go ahead and top stitch. So the reason that I don't do this one as much, I love my 1/8 1/4. That's kind of my signature. If I make a bag, it's gonna look like this. 1/8 on either side, 1/4 on either side. That's my preference. This type of handle, we can't really do that. We can do 1/8, but we have to hold these edges down in the center, which means we have to sew down the middle. So from the back side, I do 1/8 of an inch from either side of that fold. That's gonna hold everything down. I don't always care for this look, and it depends on what I'm doing for the rest of the bag. I do have a finished bag. This was an older one that I made, probably, oh boy, 8 or 9 years ago. This is my Harper handbag. And back then, that is the only way I made handles, was to fold them to the back. So this one, because these are 1.5 inches, I did 1/8 1/4, but I also have my stitching down the middle. Do I hate it? No, I don't. But it's just still not my preference. I kind of like not having a lot going on in the middle. It's an aesthetic. It's just the way that it is. But if we do this technique, we have to hold those edges down. So it's just kind of a matter of what you want to do. So we talked about with cotton how we need 4 times the measurement. With cork, we need 2 times. If we want 1 inch finished, we would need 2 inches to start. If we want 1.5 inches, we start with 3 inches. But let's talk about my absolutely favorite type of way to make a handle, and that is what I call a trifold. And I'm going to give you a little demo on this as well. So I like to do what I call a trifold. It is 3 layers. Technically, we fold it twice, but it is 3 layers. Therefore, Jessica calls it a trifold. So again, I do my 1/8 1/4. Where is my raw edge? I've got a folded edge here and a folded edge here. Well, my raw edge is in the back. It's not quite to the edge here. It's kind of tucked back just a little tiny bit. And I think that this looks really nice and clean. Plus, it's sturdy. it's even better than a 2-fold. This one right here is a 1/2 inch finished. So this one started as 1.5 inches because we needed 3 times the finished width. And this one right here for a skinny handle, so sturdy. I love how that works. Here is a 1/2 inch handle though, and this one I only did 1/8 on either side because my quarter would be on top of itself in the middle and I wouldn't like that. So this one just has my 1/8. So how do we fold this one? It's actually pretty simple. What we're gonna do here, this is my 3-inch wide piece. So for a trifold, it'll be 1 inch finished. So what I'm gonna do is use my pen and I'm going to mark over 1/3 of the width or the finished width. The finished width is going to be 1 inch. So I'm just making this one line right like that. Now I'm gonna take my tape and I put that, where's the beginning of the tape? There it is. I put that on the opposite edge. So I measured over on my left side, I'm putting the tape on the right side. And I'm just going to take that paper off. Always the most challenging part. There we go. And I'm going to fold this to that line. So I'm just going to fold this to here, right to the line. And now, if I want to, I can add tape over here, or I can use clips. I generally use clips just so I don't have tons of tape. And I'm going to fold this edge to the fold. And if you'll see, here's my fold and my edge is maybe 1/16 of an inch away. I need to make sure it's close enough that my 1/8 inch top stitching will catch it, but I don't want it hanging over the edge. So I just add a few clips, just like that. Keep clipping. And now I'm ready to do my sewing. And again, I do my 1/8 and I do my 1/4, and now I have my handle all finished and it's ready for my bag. So when it comes to cork, one of the other things to keep in mind is that cork, depending on the project, depending on the pattern, you may not have enough cork for the length of your handle in one cut. And what I mean by that, let me grab another piece. So I cut this piece from a 54-inch wide piece of cork from the total width. It's got a big string on it. This was from the full width of cork. That does not always happen. I don't always have that available. Or in the pattern might not call for that kind of a length. So we might only have 26 or 27 inches, but we need to make a really long handle like this one. So how do we sew the pieces together and still be able to fold it and get something strong? So what I like to do is a 45-degree angle. Let's see if I can find it here. Oh, you know why? I can't find it because this one actually did take the full width, but this one I can. So I'm gonna find my 45-degree angle. Here it is right here. So it's kind of hidden once it's all done, but what we're gonna do, and if you're a quilter, this will make a little bit more sense to you. We're going to take our pieces and place them right sides together at a 90-degree angle, just like this, okay? I was working on another project. So we're gonna place them just like this, and we're gonna draw a line at a 45-degree angle, and we're gonna sew on that. And then we'll cut off our excess, and I trim it down to about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And once I do that, and I bring that over, I now have a long handle, whether it's 1 or 2 pieces or 3 pieces that I've had to sew together. And once I have that, now I'm ready to continue on with my folding. Now in some of my older patterns, because I was still playing around a little bit, and I was also doing a lot of the double fold, I would tell you to sew your pieces together at a just a 1/4 inch seam, a straight seam. And that's still fine to do. But what's gonna happen here is that this is not gonna be quite as strong as the 45-degree angle. And so what I like to do if I have to sew them this way is I also trim a little in the middle after I get my seam done. I bring this side to the left, this to the right. I flip my seam, and then when I fold it in half, I get it to nest together. but that is not my preferred option. So even in any of my older patterns, if I go back and remake them, make a new sample, I do like to sew it this way, more like quilt binding. And if we're gonna do something fun like this, what if we also did something fun like this? This one right here, I've got the green, I've got the triangles, and then I've got more green. So this is a different version of a two-tone handle. It's not two-tone top and bottom different. The ends are different than the middle. So the end of this has green on either side, and I put the triangles in the center. And I think that looks super cool. And all I did for that was add my 2 green pieces to the triangles, sew them at 45-degree angles, trim and open it up. And now I have this really cool look. So I think that is just about it on handles. I just wanted to go over with you the basics, cutting, measuring, and also some of the top stitching tips that I like to share. So now that we're done with that, we're gonna go ahead in the next part of this series and work a little bit on adding some hardware. Now, unfortunately, I can't get into every piece of hardware that there is, but what we will go over is how you can add some swivel hooks or a slide, and you can make either an adjustable or a removable adjustable handle. And we'll talk a little bit about hardware like this, where we sew our handle right onto it. We'll also touch base just a little tiny bit on rivets. There's only so many things that I can go over, and I could probably make these videos forever and ever and still not get everything done. So if you're enjoying this series and you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to click subscribe, hit the notification bell, and give it a thumbs up. All right, I'll see you when we put hardware in. Bye, guys.